everybody, and welcome back to the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. We have affectionately named this podcast the Healing Zone, because that's what we do here. We are in season 2 of the podcast, where we are highlighting the stories of crooked roads of pain that lead to help and hope. But today starts a special series of podcasts for the month of April. We are going to observe Child Abuse Awareness Month. We will bring you, like today's episode, a hybrid of clinical and educational resources to those of you who are either child abuse survivors or love someone who is or who maybe wants to thrive as a child abuse survivor. We're going to bring you these resources all month. And you know, of course, that I am going to bring you those stories of hope and healing. But first, did you know that the United States has one of the worst statistics for child abuse and neglect among industrialized countries? On average, 4 to 7 children die in the United States every day from child abuse or neglect. Guys, these are pre-pandemic numbers. I think it would be fair to say that we don't have a clue how much the pandemic has increased these numbers worldwide, as mandated reporters often can't see these children. And so, if you know me, you know I'm not going to be complicit in this, and neither am I going to let you be complicit. We are going to talk about it. I can't wait for you to hear all of our guests, whether they be guests that come on like today's guest, who will bring some educational things to us, or if it's stories of hope and healing, because we are going to continue to be in the healing zone. We're going to continue to create a healing zone. So please enjoy my conversation with Erica Cuni, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Okay, so today I am so excited, as I mentioned to you guys, to welcome Erica to the podcast. And so Erica Cuni, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. I would love it if you would introduce yourself as we begin this series of podcasts on Child Abuse Awareness Month. So welcome, Erica Cuni, to the podcast. Would love it if you tell us who you are, and then we will go from there.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you for having me. I feel honored to be here. I'm excited about this conversation today. I'm Erica Cuni, the burnout professor. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist by trade, a stress, anxiety, and trauma expert. I'm also a former graduate professor of human development, trauma, relationships, and shame. Not to mention, I've been a supervisor and a program manager for 2 different children psychiatric outpatient clinics and a clinical supervisor for practicum and intern students, non-licensed and licensed clinicians. And I oversaw over 500 families. And today what I do is I help professionals go from being burnt out and bringing them to mind, body, spirit health. But thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you. And this has not been without a whole lot of technical issues. And so we are definitely being resilient, if you will, on that. So thank you so much. I've been so excited about this. And so we're just going to jump right into the podcast. As I mentioned in the intro that people will hear, you're also a podcast host. And so I want to make sure that I mention that. Your podcast is called Undeniable Truth. And you have 3 actionable items. And by the way, to my listeners, that's a hashtag Undeniable Truth. And I will put it in the show notes. But can you tell me a little bit quickly about the action items that you want the listeners of your own podcast that listen to hashtag Undeniable Truth?
In the podcast, like how we have expert advice, and then at the end of each episode are breathing exercises, and it's not necessarily guided meditations, but it is breathing exercises to help everyone learn about their breath. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, definitely that, but it's speak it, own it, live it, right?
Oh, yes, that's the tagline. Undeniable truth. We own it, speak it, live it.
Own it, speak it, live it. And everyone that listens to the Wednesdays with Watson podcast knows that that's exactly what I want to do. And so I just love your heart for people, as I've mentioned to you. I don't know, like 6 times that we've tried to record this podcast. And so you know now that I think that I just love what you do. But you and I met on a social media app of Clubhouse. And every time I heard you speaking, your message is so similar to mine, and that you want people to know that they are seen and heard and loved. Can you tell me briefly why that matters so much to you?
There's lots of reasons. This is pretty heavily layered. However, I think it goes back to my own childhood. It starts there, and my own family history. And knowing that, I do have a family history of alcoholism, mental illness. And, I have a lot of strong, resilient family members who have gone through a lot. And learning how to love ourselves, I think, is one of our biggest lessons we've all had to learn. And so, my dad's a combat Vietnam veteran. My grandfather was a Korean conflict veteran. And, each and every person that's in my family has learned in one way or another how to survive. And my mission is to not just survive. I want to thrive, and I want to help others thrive so that other families do not have to go through what our family goes through.
Wow. Yeah. And I think so much of our professions, if done right, are driven by our experiences. And like I said, I love your heart and your mission. And again, want to thank you for being here with us today. But I want to jump right in here because my podcast, like yours, is a shorter one. And my listeners know that we always identify what we call 3 C's that have been helpful in my own healing. And they are church, community, and trauma-informed counseling. And so you're bringing one of those to us today, counseling. But because I know you a little bit better than the listeners do, particularly because of my interaction with you on that app and even here, you understand the community, the importance of community too. And so that leads me to, and you kind of just answered it. My first question was going to be why. What made you choose your profession? And would it be fair to say your first answer colored by your own experiences?
Heck yeah, because my undergrad degree is in business. I was in radio sales, and I wanted to be a record executive. I did not want to be a therapist. So, life happened. And when life happened, I went back to therapy myself. And that's when I realized my passion was really more about connecting with others. I used to think it was through music, but then I realized I could do it through the therapy component. And that was the catalyst.
I love that. And and you have a whole nother story that I hope to bring you back onto my podcast to tell about. This woman, y'all, was literally hit by a Mack truck. So that's another story for another day. But let's jump right into some of the educational part of it. In your experience in your education, can you explain what happens to a child's brain? And more importantly, because this is one of the things that really draws me to you, but more importantly, what happens to their central nervous system when they experience trauma? You do a lot of calming of the central nervous system, like you said on your podcast, with breathing exercises. You've even helped me with that. And so I would love your take on this, both for survivor listeners and for people like me and for those who love us. Can you help us understand what happens to that childhood brain when they experience such trauma?
Absolutely. That is a beautiful and complicated question, right? It's simple, but yet the answer is not so simple. And it can be simple, but doing the hard work of it doesn't feel simple, if that makes sense.
Right.
Let's define trauma first. Trauma, if we look at it through the polyvagal theory is all about the vagus nerve, which is what we describe through our nervous system. And trauma is a chronic disruption of connectedness with a pattern of protectiveness. That's by Deb Dana, and she's one of the leading therapists of the polyvagal theory, integrating it into the therapy room. She works closely with Dr. Stephen Porges, and he's the one who brought forth the polyvagal theory and made it known to the medical field. So just know that trauma sidetracks the development of our nervous system. It disrupts the way that we learn how to self-regulate. And so when we are born, we're looking for connection, right? We're looking to co-regulate and connect with other beings. But if we have primary caregivers that are unavailable or it's dangerous to connect with others, we learn how to self-regulate. But that's not the way we were wired to be. We were wired to learn how to co-regulate first so that we learn that the world is a safe place, a trusting place, and then we go to self-regulation after that. So we come from a place of love and compassion. But when we're involved with trauma, it stops the connected part, right? And we learn not to trust that our primary caregivers. We learn that the world's not a safe space. And so what we do is we learn how to self-regulate from a protective place. And so that's a totally different way to connect to others, because you're not connecting. What you're doing is protecting yourself. So trauma affects us significantly. It also keeps us in a stress state, right? And so with all those stressed, it's a rigid state, I should say. And when we're stuck in that rigid state, it becomes toxic. And then we aren't able to really function the way that we are wired to function. So I hope that answers, because I can go on and on.
No, it absolutely answers it. And I've seen it in my own life. Things like hunger and, properly taking care of ourselves. And yeah, like you said, it could be a whole other podcast. But I wanted my listeners to know that there are, we're not wired for those things that you explain. It's a beautiful definition of trauma, and I always love the different definitions of trauma. And that polyvagal theory, it could be a whole other podcast too. And so, no, that's exactly what I needed my listeners to hear from you, is that we begin then to go into these self-comforting, self-regulating, fight or flight, all the things, all the terms that my listeners have heard, which often just turn into more and more difficulties in life, right? And so, no, you answered that beautifully. One of the things I wanted to ask you, I had never heard of the measurement or even the term adverse childhood experiences. Can you explain what that measurement is? And I would also like to know, is it helpful in your work?
Absolutely. ACEs is actually a study that was done. I believe it was done through the late 70s, 80s, and then it was published in 1997. And it's one of the largest studies that we have to date, and it's over 18,000 participants. And it's all geared towards examining the health and the social effects of adverse childhood experiences. And a quick side note, this was not created originally for what it's used for today. This was actually created by Kaiser Permanente. There was a doctor, Vincent Folletti, who created it to help people lose weight. And then this evolved over time into what he started to notice. And so there's several different categories that the ACE looks at. It's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, emotional and physical neglect. And then it's also looking at trauma in the household. So was there substance abuse? Is there mental illness in your family? Was your mother treated violently? Did you have a family member that was incarcerated? Or did you have a loss of a parent or abandonment? And what all of this showed, research shows, and it sounds kind of intuitive, but trauma begets trauma. So it also started to tell us that if 65% of the population has at least one ACE, and if one ACE is present, there's 80% chance that there's a likelihood of another ACE.
Wow. That is insane. I never heard of it. There's actually a quiz you could go online and take for listeners who want to do it. You can Google it. I nor Erica, are going to, we're not sponsoring that or anything like that, but it is a helpful tool. Erica, just to put it into perspective for you, I took it, mine is an 8. And so when I took the quiz, I was like, I don't even know what that means. But then when I talked to my therapist about it, he was like, he had rarely seen 8s, 9s, and 10s. And so I just want listeners under the sound of my voice to know, because now we're 28 episodes in. If my ACE score, my adverse childhood experiences score, was an 8 out of 10, there is a hope for extreme cases. And
there's always hope. There is always hope. If I can put that out there to anybody, there's always hope. Always. It's sometimes you need to have other people be there with you so that you can start to see the hope. But Amy, you are a freaking warrior, let me tell you.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. And you brought up that community, right? Like you brought up there, when you have a community and you have people and you have therapy and you have the tools, and I am here today because of those tools. having been a survivor of everything from neglect to domestic violence. And so thank you for saying that, because that is the whole reason why we do this podcast, because of hope. I want to switch gears just for a second so that I can get into your treatment modality. But before we do that, I've had a lot of questions, and I think that this might lead into your treatment modality. But there are such a thing called as attachment styles. And I have found in my own life that examining those have been helpful, particularly because I am a survivor of childhood abuse, which we are highlighting. And so can you tell us a little bit about attachment styles? I believe there are 4 of them. I might be wrong about that, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go further, I do want to give a website out. So for that ACE study, that if anybody's interested in looking at it closer, by all means, go check it out. It's www.cdc.gov/ACE/index.htm.
Perfect.
And you can see.
I'll put that in the show notes too.
Awesome. All right, so attachment theories, you are spot on. There are 4 of them, but I think for the purpose of this podcast, it's not important for us to go into each and every single one.
Right.
But know that there's 2 different types of attachment style, in the sense, 2 categories of attachment styles, 4 types. The 2 categories is secure attachment, and that is where you look at the world as a safe place. You trust it. Your insides match your outsides. You know that if you express yourself, your needs will get met, and if your needs don't get met, you know you'll be okay. There's a lot of self-worth there. That's your self-confidence, right? You just trust that you can navigate through this world in an easy way where you feel loved. That's a real broad view of this, okay?
Yeah.
The second category is insecure attachments, and there's 3 types of insecure attachments, and each one of those is basically saying your insides do not match your outsides. You've learned to navigate this world because you learned that the world is not a safe place. Your needs do not get met. Your primary caregivers were most likely did their best, but they had their own going on, so they weren't really able to be in tune with you. So you didn't learn to trust your feelings. You didn't learn to trust your perception of things. You didn't learn to trust your perception of things. Whereas in your secure attachment, you are in tune with yourself. You are aware of your feelings, and you do trust your perception of things because your primary caregivers supported that. And also, another thing to remember is your attachment styles are created. I like to call our attachment styles our love map. Our love maps are created by before the age of 5, more closer to 4 years old. And some are even saying it's solidified by the age of 2. But just know your primary caregiver's interactions with you from the get-go are extremely important in creating your perception of the world. It doesn't mean you're staying stuck in this if you had a insecure attachment. You can heal, you can find ways to navigate through this so that you can get that secure attachment. And when I'm teaching, when I was a professor at the university, I used to just say, you know those self-love gurus that are out there in today's world, they're trying to get you to have a secure attachment. Just look at secure attachment as a self-love, where you are strong in it and you know your worth and you know that you are capable of handling things.
I love that you said that, because my next question to you was going to be, is this like a personality thing that we're born with? But clearly it's colored by our trauma, by our lifestyle, by our lived experiences. But to hear again that hope that word hope that you used, that it could be changed. I know my listeners know most of my story and very much an insecure attachment style before getting help. And before, just realizing my value and that I am seen, known, loved, heard, and valued and all of those things. And so for you to say to us, but we could fix this. And so that's why I wanted to lead into your treatment modality. And I don't know much about it, and that is by design, because I wanted to hear it live on this podcast. But you are IFS Level 1 certified. That is, if I'm correct, your modality of treatment. Can you explain to us what that modality is for listeners out there who are either survivors of childhood abuse or love people who are survivors of childhood abuse? Yeah.
So just to clarify, I am IFS Level 1 trained. I am not certified, because to be a certified IFS clinician, you have to go through a couple more levels and go through a supervisory process as well. It's not simple. It's almost like you have another degree coming at you. So the importance of distinguishing that is saying that I am IFS level 1, internal family systems, and it is a trauma informed approach. It's evidence-based modality. It's based on the newest research of trauma and how to work with trauma. And I'll be honest, I learned about it when I was in grad school, because in the particular grad school that I graduated from, the director of our program was so heavily immersed in IFS, and he taught it throughout all the classes, like it infiltrated in all of our classes. So we were always talking about it. And IFS is about the language of talking about parts. And we have all these different parts to us. And the beauty of this modality is that you do not have to openly, outwardly talk about your trauma, because talk therapy is not the answer for trauma work. It's traditional talk therapy, I need to specify, where you sit and you just rehash the trauma that happened to you. And that's why every week you go back to a therapist and it's like 50 first dates or Groundhog Day. And it's like, you're just re-traumatizing yourself every single time you keep talking about it. And what new research, especially in the last decade, 15 years or so, let me try that again. In the last 15 years or so, it's really showing more that you have to understand how to process your emotions within your body. That's the key to the healing. It's not talking about it out loud. You don't have to keep rehashing everything that's ever happened to you. And the healing is faster, it's more effective, and you start to regulate your nervous system and you heal your nervous system through those ways or through these different types of modalities, because there's also EMDR and also somatic experiencing. Those seem to be the leading ones right now in the field for really showing that this is how we can truly help heal we can truly help to heal our bodies that is living in a traumatized state, because that's the key differentiation here. Just because somebody has experienced a traumatic event doesn't always mean they stay in a traumatized state. So when you come to therapy, most likely it means you've been in a traumatized state, meaning you're not able to be in the present moment. Your body's not able to get into that calm place where you can just truly be. You're either stuck ruminating about the past or you're fretting about the future. And the whole idea of trauma-informed therapy is getting the body into a calm state so you can be fully in the present moment, and then you can start to self-reflect and go from there so that you can start to heal.
And I would imagine that's especially true for children to the degree to which they can. And my own experience, you can imagine, with my first abuse happening at 3 years old, I can see the benefit of, because that central nervous system is still, as is the brain, obviously, all included, is still very much developing. And so I can see why getting to this sooner rather than later is extremely helpful. And so I love that. I use EMDR. I had never heard of internal family systems until I met you. And so I am definitely fascinated by it. But I do have to agree with you. I've heard you say so many times, and it always makes me laugh when you go, let me just be honest with you guys. Traditional talk therapy does not work. And most people are probably like mortified by that. But I got to tell you, with the state involved and all kinds of things in my own story, while I was receiving, some help in the early days, most of the time I found that I was a little bit smarter than the therapist. But until I found a therapist that specialized in a modality for trauma, like trauma-informed therapy, I really didn't begin to see any healing. So I would encourage my listeners out there to investigate the different modalities. Go to Erica's website, also to look up the internal family systems. And because, EMDR was new when I started it. And so, and people know that, of my healing. And so let me ask you this, Erica, because I just know your heart and you've already said some of it, but what would you say to the person who feels like because they were abused as a child, that their life can never amount to anything? What hope do you have for them? And again, you've already alluded to this a little bit, but you have such a passion for this. I'm just going to let you go. What hope do you have for abuse survivors like myself, or people who love them, because you have 14 years of experience and a whole lot of knowledge, and one of the smartest people I've ever met, but one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. And you don't often see those two things together. I would love for you to tell my listeners, if you have been abused, if you have been neglected, if you are part of why we are highlighting Child Abuse Awareness Month, there is hope. From your personal experience, from your heart, from your education, from your clinical experience, why should they hope?
I have a pretty high ACE score myself. I used to joke in my classes that I am shocked I don't live in Vegas, and I am not just living my life out there. I am pretty amazed at where I am today, considering where I started. And it's not to say that my family didn't love me, because I know they loved me, but they were doing the best they could with the tools that they had at the time. And it's, when you look at family systems, families are doing the best they can from generation to generation, and each generation is supposed to be doing a little bit better than the one before. And so when you start to heal yourself and find ways to heal, you not only heal you heal previous generation trauma, and then you also provide a better future for the future generations that are coming after you. And so it's so much more than just you healing yourself. And, it's interesting about how I ended up where I am, in the sense of, there's a lot that's happened in my life, but there was always something in my mind that there was something better. I didn't know how I was going to get there. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. I've stumbled quite a bit, face planted quite a bit. But that resilience, and I want to say this about resilience. I think every single person that has survived trauma is resilient. Like, you don't build resilience. That's something you've learned. You've learned how to adapt with it. You learned how to still be here on this earth. So in my book, you're already resilient. You don't need to build resilience. What we need to do now is to just learn how to give your body a rest. Just give it a rest so that you can start to thrive, and you want to take risks in life, and you can fully love your life. You don't have to just survive anymore. And so there's always hope. And I understand too that it doesn't feel like there's hope sometimes. And there's a thing that I learned in grad school was you can't always trust what you think. And
Wow.
I remember chuckling the first time I heard that. And I was like, what do you mean? I rely solely on my thinking. That's what's gotten me through some of the bad in my life, is my fact that I can rationalize it out. I can analyze it and then figure out what to do. And I realized really that was a trauma response, right? And so the more I healed, the more I'm able to just be and sit still, and I don't have to analyze anymore. Go figure. The therapist is telling you, stop analyzing, learn how to be, learn how to heal your nervous system so you can just want to thrive and love life. It doesn't feel like it's a scary place anymore.
Well, and learn the things that you say. I think I've heard it on most of the podcasts and everyone has heard it on mine, that we see you, we hear you, you're valuable, but that you have to put in the work, and it is risky work. Healing is risky work, and it is hard work, but it is worth it. And people under the sound of my voice that know my story, that know that I was babysat by Henry Lee Lucas, a serial killer who abused me. I am alive on this planet because I'm a Christian, and everybody knows that. I'm alive on this planet because I have a purpose, and I want to turn that purpose into pain, and you have done that for us today. I say it all the time, how much of a rock star you are, with your own trauma story. And, like I said, you got hit by a Mack truck. We're going to talk about that on another podcast when things actually work. But what you've done for me here today, Erica, is if I had a submission, because my whole mission is to tell people exactly what you just did, that there's hope, that you don't have to live in trauma. We can calm our nervous systems down. I have a degree. My undergrad degree is in pre-med. And so when I hear you in clubhouse rooms, and I hear you now talking about calming the nervous system, that speaks to a part of my brain that I can understand. And so for my listeners out there who are afraid of healing, if you will just, if it helps you like it did me to look at it from a scientific standpoint, like I need to calm my body down, or I'm not going to be on this planet for as long as maybe I would like to be. And so what you've done for me today is you've helped us understand the importance of recognizing trauma, fighting for yourself, fighting to know that you are seen and known and loved. But I heard one of the last podcasts I heard yesterday while preparing for the interview, and honestly just doing the deep dive, because you do some great meditations at the end of those podcasts and breathing exercises. But you had a gentleman by the name of Voy on there. And he has a statement called, and he gave it credit to somebody else, and I'm not sure, I don't know who off the top of my head, but those two words were, I decide. I decided to go tell my principal that I took 9-Klonopin the night before because I couldn't sleep. When I made that one little tiny decision, that made the ball roll for me to seek and to get help. And so what you've done here for us today is you have very succinctly, very educated, from just a clear standpoint, helped people understand a child's brain, and that how these studies before the age of 2. I was at a party the other day and watched a father cradle an adopted, by the way, little girl in his arms, and she fell asleep in his arms. And I was sitting across the room, and tears just started rolling down my cheeks because I realized that there were parts of my brain that were not formed properly, and parts of my central nervous system to this day I still have to work very hard to calm down because I didn't have that. And so what you've done for us today, and I want to thank you, is you brought awareness to the importance of not only trauma and the very real concept of adverse childhood experiences and insecure attachment style and how that's colored by our trauma, but that we can get better, that we can decide, that we can use those words, I decide, and then let it roll from there and use all the resources that we possibly could use. And so I just want to thank you for that.
Interject, because I definitely want to make 2 more points before we end, because it's very important. So there's more to just fight or flight for the nervous system, right? And that's usually the folks that are like looking to actively figure out what to do. They're aggressive or they're passive aggressive, right? And then there's others that when the stressor is just too much, we go into this possum state where you're just like doing yes when you want to say no, and you're just, there's like nothing to you. You're just numb and void of things, right? And you feel apathy towards everything. That is more when you need to be able to engage back with the world. So that's like doing couple dancing, like tango, East Coast swing, type, or West Coast swing, or martial arts, kickboxing, because you are actively engaging in the world and you're moving your body. Whereas if you're in the fight or flight and you're agitated and your brain's going a mile a minute and you're an overthinker, that's when you have to do the calming techniques and kind of like yoga if you're not able to sit still, because I was definitely one of those people that could not sit still in the beginning. I was like, that's not me. I can't do that. I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
But yoga is another way. So there's different ways to handle this. I just had to point that out because not everyone's going to be in the overthinking part. A lot of people are going to be in the numb part where they don't even think. They're like spaced out. And so if you're spaced out, do activities that engage you back with the world. If you're overthinking, do something to calm you down.
Wow. You just helped me, because I think when I hit stop on this, I'm going to go do something to calm me down because I'm in that second state. I think that's an important delineation, and I'm glad that you said that, because I think it's an important delineation for adults. But what you've done for me today is, I hope that this podcast and this series of podcasts that we do over this month stops wounded children from becoming wounding adults. And you alluded to it earlier, and there's a whole concept of intergenerational trauma, but stopping the madness. Like when I think of my mom abandoning me as a 49-year-old adult, I can now look at it and go, what happened to you? What happened to you? And so thank you for your important work. I do want you to go ahead and give a shout out to all the places they could find you, because you do amazing work. And so tell us where we could find you, your preferred method of communication, and anything that we can do to help your mission to help others and all that you're doing. So tell us where we could find you.
Sure, thank you. And also, before we go further, I do just need to say this. Even though I am a therapist, I am not your therapist. To anybody that's listening, I was simply giving information for entertainment, educational purposes only. This does not replace clinical advice or professional advice. You still need to consult with your own professionals. Just needed to put that disclaimer out there. And if you're looking to find out some more information, you can find me at my website, which is www.theburnoutprofessor.com. I am on social media. Instagram and Facebook is at The Burnout Professor. Twitter and Clubhouse is at The Burnout Prof, PROF. And LinkedIn is my name, Erica Cuni, LMFT. And I think that's all the social media currently, which is enough. And I also just want to highlight that I don't do individual work. I'm not actively doing therapy anymore. I am more of an educator. So you'll hear me more on workshops or podcasts like this or on Clubhouse, but I am not doing individual therapy work.
Well, and I think that's also an important delineation. I laugh all the time when you say I'm a therapist, but not your therapist, and I meant to actually mention that. And so what you are doing is important work, and I want you to know that. There have been many times I've been in Clubhouse rooms that you may not know that I'm in, that I hear you, and your own club called the Burnout Club on Clubhouse, because as an entrepreneur and a trauma survivor, I'm in those rooms listening to things like you've said on this podcast. And so I want you to know something before I hit stop on this. And I say this on every single podcast because you say it all the time, but I want to say it to you. I've never met you in real life, as the kids say, but I do know one thing to be true, Erica Cuni. You are seen, you are known, you are heard, you are loved, and you are valued, and you are a freaking rock star, as I always tell you. Thank you for working through all the technical difficulties. It seems like every time I bring a professional onto my podcast, this happens. And so we are dropping this no matter what it sounds like, because you have dropped some really good information for my people and for me. And I just want to say thank you.
Oh, I truly appreciate you, Amy. I'm glad our paths have crossed, and thank you. I'm honored that I was on your podcast today.
All right, my friend, I'll see you in the club, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, take care. Well, guys, if you're anything like me, that interview filled your brain with knowledge and your heart with hope. And I can't stress enough how much Erica just loves people and wants people to heal. And so I hope that you have found some of that today. If the statistics that you heard me talk about at the beginning of this episode are true, then there are many of you under the sound of my voice who have experienced childhood abuse. There are many of you who love us. So I am really hopeful that Erica's message of both healing our central nervous systems as well as just the sheer hope that we can thrive from childhood abuse will resonate with you. I hope that you will continue to follow our journey here in April, as we will probably drop extra episodes to bring awareness to Child Abuse Awareness Month. I do have a little fun thing going on my Instagram that I would love for you to join. It is called #LostChildhoodChallenge, and every day in the month of April, I am trying to find a childhood that I never had. And I am filming silly things that I am doing so that people can see that there is hope, even though such abuse has occurred. And so as Phil Baker's song plays us out, Marked by You, I do want you to know that my life is marked by him, and I will not quit. I will never, ever stop fighting for you. And so until I see you again, and who knows when that will be, in the month of April, let the healing continue.
And when my hope is fading, and when worries do assail me, I will remember how you never failed me. You have pulled me out from the depths. You have saved me from certain death. You have shown yourself faithful to me over